Hi there, Paranormal Investigators of New England, and we're going to do a member story. We have today Alane Burgess, who is the Massachusetts Assistant Director of Paranormal Investigators of New England, and she has some intriguing stories of visual apparitions that she's had in her past that have really impacted her life. And I'd like to welcome you, Elaine, and if you would like to go ahead and start in, we're anxious to hear.
Sure. Hi, Betty. So as I was saying to you, what's really interesting in my story is I've been doing investigations now for about 25 to 30 years, and I've gone to numerous locations. I've had, numerous experiences, but the way to describe me is I'm more of an energy feeling type of person. So I do have the empath, I have the intuition, but a lot of what I experience really is more energy based. So I can tend to feel energy around me or get a sense of if somebody's present, what that energy may feel like from an emotional perspective. But one thing that I have usually lacked is the ability, like other people have, to be able to see people or to see apparitions. So I thought it would be interesting to talk about the three times in my life I have actually experienced the ability to see apparitions two times and then a mist another time. So going back, my first experience with seeing an apparition was probably, I would say, about 12 to 15 years ago. And during this time, a friend of mine and I were in Gettysburg. And of course, for everybody who's been to Gettysburg, how can you go and not have an experience?
Hi.
And, just to throw out there, I've been to Gettysburg 7 times. Um, one of my favorite places to investigate, one of my favorite places to go, but only one of those times did I actually experience an apparition. So what had happened was my friend and I were driving around on the battlefield and it was dusk. So it wasn't completely dark. It wasn't light, but it was just around that time where we knew we just had one more lap and then we would have to leave the park because it was just about that point where it was going to be dark. So we're driving down the road and, we're driving and we're just looking and we're not really saying anything. And I'm looking up ahead and I see what looks like somebody walking their dog. So I looked over at my friend. I'm like, well, geez, people really love to walk their dogs around here on the battlefield. And she's like, Elaine, what are you talking about? I said, well, right there, Christina, don't you see? Like there's somebody walking a dog. I'm like, well, wait a minute. It looks bigger than a dog. I'm not sure what it is. Maybe somebody's riding a horse. And she's like, what are you talking about? So I said, well, wait till we get up there. So as we were driving up, the apparition, which was more of I don't call it like a white cloud. It wasn't actual features, but it was like somebody was coming on a horse and then they just did a turn and walked into the woods and then they vanished because by the time we got to there and I looked over, in the wooded area, it had been gone. So just really wild. And I looked at my friend, I said, oh my goodness. I said, I think for the very first time in my life, I just straight up experienced an apparition. That has never happened to me before.
Did she see it?
She did not see it.
And she was
No.
looking in the right direction and she didn't
She
see it. So what allowed you to, I wonder, why did you see it and she didn't? What allowed you that permission?
That's a fantastic question. And I ask that too, because a lot of times I can be at locations and I can be with somebody who is very clear as day saying, well, I see somebody at the top of the stairs and I'm looking and I don't have that visualization. So I don't know if it was just my mode at that moment in time was just more relaxed, more meditative.
Mhm.
I'm not sure, but for whatever reason, I was able to see something. And it was just amazing to have that first experience.
Was. Do you recall, because so many people go to Gettysburg and thank God for Gettysburg for seeing all these sites because you were bound to see something at Gettysburg around dusk. And I will say it's usually Spangler Springs or somewhere there. Do you remember the spot? Like, was there a name of the spot where you saw this?
It wasn't, it was on the way toward, It wasn't Devil's Den, it wasn't Round Top, Big Round Top, it wasn't Spangler Springs. It was driving down more that main road where you're by the, I almost want to say the North Carolina or the Virginia Memorial, but it was not one of the more well-known spots or the hot spots. It wasn't the wheat field. It was more back a ways, and it was just more of the longer drive to get to where the other more populated sites would be for where we would tend to experience more paranormal activity.
That's fantastic. Yeah, makes you wonder. Why then?
Yeah.
Why you? Were you meant to just see that and to renew your faith that stuff is out there, or what other worldly reason was there? What was the other time?
So the other time, this experience I'm going to approximate was probably about 7 years ago, 6 years ago. So one of my best friends used to live in an apartment, locally, in the town next to me in Ludlow. And the place was very highly, highly, highly active. So she would tell me a lot of, different stories about things that have happened. And I had gone over there on a few occasions to investigate. So this one particular time, I spent the night at her place. I actually spent the night at her place two times. The first time didn't really have major experiences. The second time, it was very unique. I had woken up probably around 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, if of course it's in the middle of the morning hours. And I remember waking up, I was sleeping on the couch and I had looked over onto the stairs and full as day, the first and only time that I've actually seen a full, what looked like a little boy, ages 6, 7, 8 years old, dressed up in like an old time school uniform or Sunday's best, as maybe they would call it back then, because this was like an 1800s old Miller's farmhouse. So I had woken up and I saw that. My initial response was panicked. Oh my God, like what is this? But then I remember in my head, I just kept saying, calm down. This is what you're here for. This is what you've been asking for. You've been wanting to have this type of an experience and see something like this. So that was my second profound experience. And I wish she still lived there
Yeah.
because that place was as active could be. There was never a dull moment. There was always something happening with the equipment whenever we would investigate there. But that one particular night, and again, I was sleeping, I was meditative, I was calm. I didn't have anything happening in my head other than the fact that I woke up, I looked over, there was a little boy sitting on the stairs.
Was
And
he
it was,
looking back at you?
oh yeah, he was just looking at me. Yeah, just kicking back and just looking at me as if curious or okay, so I'm still here, and you're here, and there was nothing to be afraid about or worried about. It was just he's home, he's sitting on the stairs, and he's just observing.
Isn't that wild?
Yeah,
That's wild. Again, why? Why then? What?
yeah.
Yeah.
And I sometimes wonder now that you're asking those questions, is because I think there's been a part of me that has always said, I would just really love to see this. And I think we found we can't force ourselves to see something just because we want something to happen, doesn't mean it's going to.
Mhm.
And as I shared, I've been to so many different locations through the course of the past 25 to 30 years. And as much as I'm hoping I'm going to see something or I want something to happen, it's not up to me when those things happen. And they're not just going to occur because I'm wishing and hoping they do. But on these two occasions, I guess it was my time that I was meant for whatever reason to be able to get a glimpse into something that for me is very uniquely special because I don't have that gift.
Yeah, and I think that's interesting that you said meditative type of state or, relax. And maybe that's a key to it. And to allow ourselves to say, may I, or request it. I'd like to see an apparition, or will you allow me to in a meditative state? Uh,
Yeah.
So that's
And
it.
maybe because I wasn't expecting something to happen, and moving on to the third time with the mist. Um, and maybe that's the answer because I wasn't expecting it. I wasn't consciously wanting it to happen or think about it, even though it was always there. But the third time, and this is again probably about, I would say about 4 years ago now, maybe 5 years ago, I had gone to the Conjuring House, like most people have, right, a few times. And this was actually the third time that I was at the Conjuring House. And it was an all-night investigation. And this happened about 4 o'clock in the morning. I was with a group of people, and they were in the stairs middle bedroom. And I was by myself in the bedroom next to where they have the chalkboard and the birthing room. So they're talking, they're asking questions, there's a lot of equipment being used. And I'm sitting and I'm, just finally kind of looking over, and they'd been in there for probably a good half an hour, 45 minutes. And I look over and I see this mist coming outside of the birthing room door at the Conjuring House. And it comes across the wall, and then it kind of starts to go down the stairs a little bit, and then it, kind of starts to come back up. But it was just kind of chilling and hovering, and it was a mist. So I wasn't able to see a person or anything. And I just recall saying, hey, are you guys shining like any lights in here? Or like you guys doing anything in that room that's, creating anything to happen in here? And they're like, well, no, why? I said, well, because I'm seeing a mist. There's like a legit mist that has come outside of the birthing closet across the wall, and it's kind of going down the stairs. So I did have somebody, come into the room. Fortunately, they did see it too. So it was just another extremely wild experience, to say, wow, okay. And at that time, I was exhausted. I was tired. Again, probably meditative, but nothing had really been happening, from that whole time we were there, other than maybe just minor things.
Mhm.
So again, it was just the timing that it was interesting that it happened to be in a time that I was exhausted, I was tired, I was ready to go to sleep, and I had kind of like checked out to the whole investigating experience at that point because it's 4 o'clock in the morning. So I'm like, oh, I just really want to get to bed. But you don't do that there when you spend the whole night.
I think
Yeah,
it's
so
cool
that,
that other people saw it because
yeah,
that validated it, of course, and that's usually why we investigate in teams is that so if someone sees something
yeah,
and hopefully the person with them may see it too, so it's gives them more
yeah,
validation to the
yeah.
event that happened. That is so cool. Was the mist like in the shape of a person?
Not at all. No, it was just like a cloud. It was like a mist that just came out and just kind of, clouded itself around and then made its way a little bit over to here. Like it stayed for a little bit, then it made its way over, then went down to like where the stairs were and then came back up and then just dissipated. But no, not in a person. And it like crept along the wall, and by the wall, I mean upper here, like on the wall, not like full bodied where it came across the wall, but it just floated like up on the top
That's
or
amazing.
top or part.
Oh,
Yeah.
how I wish you had caught that on video.
I thought of that afterwards. I said, of course, I
Yeah.
didn't
But
think
you can't
that
think in that
moment.
moment. When something happens, you're
Yeah,
so enthralled that it's really hard to think sometimes, especially because it
yeah,
may only last seconds. You wouldn't, by the time you brought up your camera, you would have missed it.
right,
But
right.
so yeah, I know how that being in the moment is hard sometimes to
Yeah.
work past that and you know get to
Right. And then to let the brain register it, right? Because sometimes I'm looking
yeah,
at things and I'm like squinting my eyes. I'm like, am I seeing what I think I'm seeing? So, I have to give it a few seconds just to say, okay, am I really truly seeing what I feel I'm seeing here?
yeah,
And I know I am because that's the other thing I think too. Like when we have that personal experience that, we know is ours, that is such a beautiful validation because I think a lot of times we can go and, we can hear things or we can hear other people's experiences, but when we know something is profoundly impacting us, to me, that's just even more raw and just even more real. And of course, keeps me excited because I'm like, oh my goodness, why can't I do this all the time? But I'm not meant to. And I think that's for me what makes these three experiences so special because it's not something that I have happened to me often or frequently. And so when they do, they're such profound moments that I really appreciate. And I just look forward to hoping that they're going to continue.
yes, yeah. And maybe the more we go out and search, the more we're allowed to see. I don't know. I wish I knew the recipe for it because I would
Yeah.
give anything to see apparitions on a regular basis. Or maybe I wouldn't. Maybe it's just they say there's a
Care-
downside to that, which I'm sure there is. So
Sometimes be
but
careful what we wish for, right?
that's I just got mediumship envy, that's all. So,
Yeah.
well, thank you so much for sharing that.
You're welcome.
And for you, the audience watching, you can find Alane on our webpage, pi-ne.org. And again, she's the Massachusetts Assistant Director. And if you would like to tell your story, and please submit it at footsteps802@gmail.com. It'll come to me and I'll set up a Zoom with you and let's chat it out on we'll put your story out there because these are so interesting. I love to hear about them. So really appreciate you coming on today, Elaine.
Yeah, thank you for having this opportunity and asking me to do this, Betty. I appreciate that. Thank you.
You're welcome.